fifth grade. Really ain't no difference if that nigga gay.
Blood satellite.
There's one other thing I wanted to cover, and I guess it's somewhat related to the Matt Walsh thing and the transgender thing of being unable to see the forces at work that are really making something the biggest thing that we're talking about. So like we said, with the transgender debate, what you're actually seeing is the conflagration of a lot of other movements that are kind of colliding. Like, you cannot tell the story of the rise of transgenderism without, of course, the John Moneys, the Alfred Kinseys, these really like mid 20th century movements to change sexuality and change family dynamics through sexuality. But then there's also feminism. But then there's also like the pharmaceutical companies. But then there's these things that happen in parallel. And there's not going to be one guy at the top of the pyramid. And maybe there's other certain religious groups who have certain ideas about, you know, the relationship of sexuality with children. And then maybe this is just what happens in liberalism when you need to center the fringe all the time. So yeah, it's like 7 different things. So just like that, we have what I had read recently, which was The Fourth Industrial Revolution by Klaus Schwab. And this is building off of the last clip in the last episode we had, where we discussed The End of History and The Last Man by Francis Fukuyama, which I believe was, if you want to understand the modern liberal right now, read that book, because it explains not only the philosophical foundations of liberalism, and, you know, very reasonably, and the philosophy behind it, and maybe even the spirituality behind it, but also its application today and how we got from point A to point D right now. It's not that it was hijacked. It's not that it was taken over by crazy leftists. Just like the Matt Walsh thing, this thing called wokeness did not just fall out of the sky, and that's your enemy. And if we, like the idiot fridge comedians saying, oh, we got to get rid of these woke people, you don't get it. You don't get what the phenomena is. Just like that, we look at what the World Economic Forum is talking about, what Klaus Schwab is talking about, what all these NGOs and these supranational fucking groups are doing to push certain agendas. So to put Klaus Schwab or George Soros at the top of that pyramid, I think, is a mistake. Now, these are bad actors. These are bad people. They are subversive entities. We know they're what they want to do because they've said what they want to do. However, if you were to get rid of George Soros or Klaus Schwab tomorrow, it would not really impact the machinery of what's going. And that's all we're trying to say. And we will point to these people as corporeal examples of there are people doing this, and they have addresses, and they have websites, and you can download their white papers to see what their plans are. Yes. But also the scope of the gear work that we're dealing with isn't really tied to one sovereign guy who's pulling the strings. But I wanted to read this book, The Fourth Industrial Revolution. Now, this would have come out around 2017, I believe, so it's a bit old. His most recent book, yes, 2017. His most recent book was COVID-19, The Great Reset. And the reason I wanted to read this book rather than that one, which would have come out obviously very recently, was because the Great Reset book kind of just affirms what he was saying in this book.
2020 has been challenging on a lot of levels, as economic, environmental, and societal frailties have been laid bare. But it's also proved that when we need to, we can act rapidly and restructure our lives.
Recovery from the pandemic is an opportunity. We can see rays of hope in the form of a vaccine, but there is no vaccine for the planet. Nature needs a bailout.
You don't want to go back to the status quo that you had before simply because it was the status quo that got us here.
With everything falling apart, we can reshape the world in ways we couldn't before. Ways that better address so many of the challenges we face. And that's why so many are calling for a great reset.
He'll lay the groundwork with this book and say, oh, because of COVID-19, we've shown that everything I've been talking about must be put into 20th gear. We have to really ram this through because it's the end of the world as we know it. And I feel fine regardless because I am just a construct of bugs.
Because this crisis will be with us until we really have found a remedy. So we have to prepare for a more angry world. and how to prepare. It means to take the necessary action to create a fairer world.
But Klaus Schwab, so he writes. It's not a long book. It reminds me of a marketing book. It reminds me because I would read a lot of marketing books. I can tell when they're trying to pad out a book. I can tell when, wow, there's a lot of paragraph breaks in here. Wow, you picked one of the larger sized fonts. And wow, there's entire pages where you actually don't say anything. This is like marketing book 101. However, within this, you will find here's what I believe, here's what I want to do, and here's what we are doing, and here's examples. Actually, I'll give you an example right off the top about one of the ways he doesn't say anything. Like the last book, like The End of History and The Last Man, what's amusing about it is they'll lay out the framework of their entire worldview, and then they'll say there are some bad aspects of this. There are some unintended consequences, and they'll list them, and then they'll say, yeah, and we got to keep an eye on it. They won't actually provide any solution to the problem they pointed out. So here's one about, he's just talking about the internet, talking about privacy issues. So this would have been like page 72, talking about here's where we're going, here's one of the problems we might have. Despite the transnational character of the internet network and the growing global economy, data rights and data protection regulations are still heavily fragmented. Rules around the collection, processing, and reselling of personal data are well defined in Europe, but are still weak or entirely lacking in many other jurisdictions. Given increased concerns about cybercrime and identity theft in many jurisdictions, the balance between surveillance and freedom is rapidly tipping towards increased monitoring, as shown by revelations brought to light by Edward Snowden, the American intelligence analyst, blah, blah, blah. So that's just the end of that paragraph. He just said, like, it says, like, yeah, there is a concern that this thing that we're doing will lead to increased monitoring and loss of privacy and freedom. Anyway, and the book is full of this stuff. And just like a lot of the liberal works, it's, yeah, we should keep an eye on that. But the fact that you don't give me concrete solutions of what to address with that or possible ways out of this tells me you're not that concerned. But there's a lot of that in the book. There's a lot of wishy-washy language. But just to give people the outline of what this is. The Fourth Industrial Revolution. What is that? So, the first industrial revolution he describes, so I'm using his terminology here. The first industrial revolution was railways and steam engines. The second was mechanized assembly and automation. The third was the computer revolution. And the fourth industrial revolution, it builds off of the third and is artificial intelligence, sensors, and digital space. And he had said, and this is what I don't think some people have latched on this, but not a lot of people have seen where this part can go. Is like what makes the fourth industrial revolution special is this is all taking place across physical, digital, and biological domains. So, and this will come up a lot in the book where he says really what separates this is the erasure of the divisions between the human body and cyberspace and machines. And that sits right at the center of what this is. And he says that's a good thing. So before we go into that, realize that that's the language of what we're talking about, the fourth industrial revolution, that he says not only is this inevitable, but it's also good. And like I said, Schwab is not necessarily leading this. Since, okay, if you look at this, what always stood out to me as I'm reading this is, like I said, this reminds me a lot of marketing books I read, which is true. I saw a lot of this stuff being talked about in conferences I would have attended years and years ago, before the podcast, before all this shit. Conferences, marketing books, talking about, look how exciting this technology is. And so for marketing, it was always AI. Not only was it AI in analytics and data processing, it was always AI in content production. And we joked about this on our channel a few times, even that a lot of blogs can just be churned out by AI. A lot of the and this might tie into dead internet theory. Dead internet theory being, once again, the belief that the vast majority of the internet as we know it is either fake or dead, abandoned websites, or just bots, which is true. And that you can find data based on this research. And this is something that they've been talking about like even 5 to 7 years ago. I was reading articles about this. Again, they don't know what to do about it, but most of it is fake. So the problem is that I know there are people involved in this, and there's specific people and specific groups with specific agendas. The problem is that there's a lot of different groups. So from my perspective in marketing, the excitement was coming from private companies, and it wasn't coming from NGOs, and it wasn't coming from nonprofits saying, guys, this is the new trend. It was a lot of private companies saying, this is what we're investing millions in dollars in developing. So IBM is developing this independently of the World Economic Forum, and the government is developing it. The CIA is developing this independently of IBM. Really, there's, you can probably name 20 different independently run organizations that are doing this at the same time for different reasons. But that's why it is coming. It is somewhat decentralized, and someone like Klaus Schwab is obviously a leader, and he is speaking to people saying, this is the future, we should do this. But if Klaus Schwab was gone, I'm not convinced that IBM wouldn't, and Alphabet, Google, wouldn't be doing this. Facebook wouldn't be doing this independently of each other. And we've talked about this before, but even in my career, I dealt with a few clients. One client actually, but that client had a couple other clients we were working with about the longevity industry, about, in essence, making people live to the age of 200 and above. And these are people like Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk is involved. Any billionaire is kind of interested in funding this research. Bill Gates is funding this for sure. And the trick is that it is like 200 different companies across the world handling independent components of it. So if you want to make someone live to the age of 200, you don't start a company that does that. You start, here's one organization, maybe it has government funding, maybe not. Maybe it's a startup. They're trying to figure out how to repair cells. Right? How to make cells that are constantly repairing themselves and don't break down with old age. Well, that's one. But then you need two other companies that are handling cognitive abilities and need to handle the brain and memory, your strength. You could make a body that lives forever, but the mind can't. Well, how are we addressing that? Then you have bones. So there's cells, but then there's bones. And so you have all these independent companies, and they get money from governments, they get money from angel investors, they get money, whatever. But they all have different parts. So like this sort of thing, this fourth industrial revolution with AI and things like that, and we'll talk more about the actual components of this. There are like 100 different companies across the world. I don't think there's one ringleader, but I think there are people trying to be ringleaders of this like tidal wave of, I don't even want to call it development or progress, but it's just this disruptive innovation. Let's call it that. Now, here's one for you. Let me walk that back a bit, because one word he says a lot in this book, and you hear this word a lot in marketing, and you hear this word a lot in tech and in startups: disruption. Disruption must be pursued at all costs. And in this book, Klaus Schwab is talking about how he gives recommendations to governments. What should every government be doing right now? They should be putting as much money as they can into disruptive technologies. Now, a lot of people in marketing view disruption as just a catchphrase. It's just something that seems exciting and new, because we always love new, we always love shiny. So disruption is something that makes the squares go, what? What? My paradigm is shifting. That's what you want. But disruption is just revolution for the sake of revolution. Disruption could also be a shitty kid in class raising his hand and calling the teacher a cunt. And take it from me, that doesn't lead you anywhere good.
It's fun though.
Shitty kid dimes. It's all coming together. It looks like the spider's caught himself another fly. But yeah, disruption for the sake of disruption. That is what he's talking about in this book, and that we must run towards disruption. The idea of progress, capital P progress, as constant disruption and constant revolution. Now that is something I think we can pin to Klaus Schwab. That is something I think we can pin to technocrat ideologues, because that is on their banner. But the technologies themselves might be somewhat decentralized. So that's why when I pin things on Klaus Schwab, I'm trying to pin specific things on Klaus Schwab, and things that I have seen kind of rain down from the rainforest into my life, which is it disrupt some guy, some CEO who's wearing a $10,000 suit over a Hawaiian shirt, asking me if is this idea disruptive? That's how this gets. That's how it makes my life a living hell.
Yep.
So thank you. So that's what I know what this is about. And he says he states that the world needs leadership across all domains to fight pushback. He says that early on because he says this is what's happening, and as leaders, as governments, we need to invest in disruption, and we also must invest in predicting pushback. And like you just kind of chuckled at pushback. Well, what's pushback? Well, it's the people who don't get it yet. So if you're wondering what guys like him are talking about, they're talking about that. And he said, and in service of that, he says that the government needs to be more aggressive and bold funding of outrageously experimental research. And he said, not to talk about disruption, he said the more experimental the research, the better. Says that in the book. Wow. And you can't tell me that that's not something that's being pursued. If you know anything about scientists, and scientists not only doing this, but also they want to attach their name to something. They want to have their. You think fucking scientists aren't above? They're above credentialism. They're not. Most of them only got into this because they love homework and they love credentialism. They love the idea of their name being attached to a thing. So yeah, this as outrageous as possible research really does appeal to these people. And if you've known anyone in science, you'll know this. You see how they fucking talk about people. They talk about people like a scientist would, an irreligious, amoral person who actually can't really tell the difference between a human and a bug and a mammal. Go corner a scientist at a dinner party if you go to those, which you shouldn't. You only get invited to those if they're sizing you up like an anaconda to devour you. Don't walk into a dinner party with any adrenochrome in you. I'm just going to say that.
Yeah, don't do it.
Put that. Write that on your bulletin board. And he's got a message to the governments of the world. He says in trying to answer these questions, one thing is clear and of great importance. The countries and regions that succeed in establishing tomorrow's preferred international norms in the main categories and fields of the new digital economy, and in brackets he lists them, here they are: 5G communications, the use of commercial drones, the Internet of Things, digital health, advanced manufacturing, and so on, will reap the considerable economic and financial benefits. In contrast, countries that promote their own norms and rules to give advantages to their domestic producers while also blocking foreign competitors and reducing royalties that domestic companies pay for foreign technologies, risk becoming isolated from global norms, putting these nations at risk of becoming the laggards of the new digital economy. So he's out there, again, this is what these guys are promoting, globalist FOMO, globalist fear of missing out. And if you think the political class in these countries is too smart to fall for that, you're wrong. You think Justin Trudeau is too clever for this, too Machiavellian? No, he takes whatever you upload into his retard skull. So when read this is what's happening. This is 2017. A lot of what this is evident in your lives right now. That's why I think this book written in 2017 is good, because okay, how much of this actually came to pass? Now, we won't get into 5G communications, which we will at some point, but when you hear, and again, this is from my perspective, when you hear people champion the gig economy, it comes from stuff like this. And years ago, when we first started hearing about the gig economy, this was talked about by marketers and startup guys as their salvation. And that, there's this, we talked about this book a while ago. It was The Forever War by Joe Haldeman. And it's about, just brief synopsis for people. It's a book, about sci-fi book, classic book. Go out and read it. The Forever War, similar to Starship Troopers. Guy goes out, they're fighting an alien race, but it plays around with time because there's time dilation where you go off to fight the war, you come back, and 100 years have passed or 20 years have passed. So it's a metaphor for people who would go to war, go to Vietnam, come back, societies change, hippies hate me, all that stuff. But it's taken to a sci-fi direction where the real theme of the book is, what am I fighting for anymore? I come back to a society that not only treats me as hostile, but I don't even recognize the society. I don't want to save this. But one of the things he comes back to is his mom. His dad is dead, right? His dad passed away. His mom's there. Mom's remarried to a woman, come home, mom's old and gay. You got to deal with that. She's working again because that's what everyone does. Everyone works. But what people do, it's the gig economy he was describing, where someone else gets a big job, and to maximize their free time, they carve off hours of their job and farm it out to freelancers. So his mom is working, but she's working like a bunch of different scrap jobs to make money, to pay for their nice apartment, because they got this nice apartment. But this is also a future where they have death panels, where they've decided that, oh, you're too old, we're actually going to outright give you less healthcare. So if you're sick, well, you're going to die. So it's in her interest to maximize her safety by working these scrap jobs. That is the world we live in now. And I can tell from my perspective, from the business development side, every startup is excited about this. I don't like it because, first of all, freelancers usually suck. Second of all, they need to figure out how to make their lives work. So they usually do worse work, or they take tons of projects and they try and cut corners and, whatever. People have said this all before. I'm against it, but he talks about it like it's liberating. It's freedom. Like people can work whenever they want. In this gig economy, in the Uber economy, in the WeWork economy, the businesses that are built on this, will say, well, if you don't want to work, you don't have to work, and you can actually work weird hours. But that's not what happens in any free freelance market. What happens is it's a race to the bottom on price, and you actually have to work twice as much for less pay, and you work more. You're working constantly. There's no one who says like I've maximized my leisure and I'm only going to work when I want to. No, you actually need to work more when other people want you to work. So it no matter how you feel about that, it doesn't do what it was promised. It doesn't increase liberty. It does not increase freedom. It makes you more into a slave class or a serfdom. And then if you ask Klaus Schwab about that, he'll say, well, we got to keep an eye on that. There's no argument that you can make where he would be like, oh, you're right. We should rethink this. So, yeah, and that's what you're dealing with right now. And for anyone who works in design, you know what this is like. Anyone who works any freelance job, this is what contractors have dealt with forever. If you're in construction, forget about it. And he's saying, well, the problem is that everyone's not doing that. So if everyone in the entire world did that, it would be better. And he's got a name for this in the book, actually. It's called, hold on to your hats, the me economy.
Oh my God.
Now, that sounds like something that's good. That sounds like right and good. I think the me economy sounds right and good.
It's good writing.
So basically, to put it in so many terms, and I've heard this 100 different places, but the idea is, it's an on-demand economy. They'll also call it that, the on-demand. I've got a certification, and this is something you might want to weigh in on as well. I got a certification a couple of years ago in lean methodology, and this was developed in Japan. It's an interesting sort of business development and management technology, and the goal is to reduce waste as much as possible. It's constant optimization. It's constant looking at the value stream of your business. Like, let's say you run a store, and then you can map this out horizontally, beginning to end, from tail to snout, from when a customer places an order at the very start, at the very end, when they receive their order and you receive payment. Now, all along the way there might be 3 little nodes. There might be 20, depending on what you're building. A laptop will eventually be longer. But you're like, okay, they place an order. How long does it take to get to who receives that order? Maybe it takes an hour before someone actually clicks that I've read the order. Can we reduce that hour to something automatic? Right? They'll look at the time thing, say, how long does it take to produce? Can we bring that time down? How much, and here's where it gets important, how much stockpile do we have? Do we have warehouses full of items that are just sitting there? Well, that's a waste. The system that they want is an on-demand system where you produce something only when it's ordered. You actually don't have any stock. You don't have any backlogged items. You don't have anything saved up for a rainy day, let's say, where a machine breaks. You're like, well, we can fulfill orders, maybe for a month, something like that. So their system is and that's what he wants to do. But that means that these systems can't get any hiccups. Otherwise, the entire fucking thing shuts down. Now, I like the lean methodology because I like reducing waste. I like looking at a system where, okay, how can we optimize this? Spend less money, waste less time, make things easier, only put people where they should be putting, because you reduce redundancies, any people just hanging around. What I get that. But if you apply that to everything, that means it is a perfectly lubricated system. But if you view any sort of stockpiling or saving anything as waste, that means you actually don't have anything for, there's no contingency plans or anything you can save for a crisis. Because they would also say, like, and you hear this a lot now, that anyone who saves resources for later is wasting, like saving money,
Right.
saving
Yeah, I've heard
gold,
that.
anything. Yeah, so I'm like, well, yeah, I get the logic behind that money is a transactional medium, okay, but we need to have a concept of assets. And when I read this stuff, I see an attack on assets. I see an attack on private ownership. I see an attack on you kind of hoarding things for yourself just in case. That's what they're trying to attack. It's you being able to check out of the system, because they're also attacking private property. They're also attacking property, period. Like maybe you just share, it's kind of anarchic in that way. Now, he won't outright say that, but if you listen to the value statements of Uber, we want to make a world where no one owns cars. There's just Uber. Now, we look at that as a very idealistic corporate statement, but at the same time, he's saying, well, I don't want you to own a car. We own all the cars, and there's not even drivers anymore. There's autonomous cars. That's what they're talking about. So you won't need to own anything. This is when people say, oh, you'll own nothing and you're happy. Someone heard that soundbite and they kind of laugh at it. But no, there's entire multi-billion-dollar businesses that are built on this paradigm and trying to develop this paradigm. So you can't act like it's nothing. And how does that matter? Well, that means that these systems are not, to use a phrase that some people don't like, anti-fragile. That means that you optimize it so much that you can't, the first rainy day fucks with you. And because you're so interconnected with everything else, it fucks with everyone. Because what he's trying to attack is nationalism. And he'll say that, like we said in that little paragraph I read, the idea of you having a nation state and you producing your own commodities, that's stupid. Not long ago, we talked about the book, The Free Market Doesn't Work. And what a lot of these power players want is like your entire economy should be built for servicing this other thing that I want you to do. If you spend more of your land like growing vegetables, that's bad. Don't worry about vegetables. We'll sell them to you for cheap. And if we decide not to, now you're fucked. But the idea of having a nation saying, I'm not going to put everything in here into servicing this one global economic thing. I think I need a third of my country growing tomatoes. I think I still need some farmers in case this doesn't work so we can feed ourselves. Klaus Schwab looks at you like that's a waste of time. And if you want to fight against that, you need to have an argument in favor of some kind of nationalistic sovereignty, which he is outright attacking.
Yeah, of course.
That's just my little rant on that. But some other, I'm going to go into the details of what he's talking about, just to give people the right scope here. So, like when he talks about megatrends, these would be new paradigms, things that will change everything and make you rethink things. So, these might sound quaint, but these written in 2017, autonomous vehicles, 3D printing, new materials, and advanced robotics. All right. Now, we talk about new materials. What's he talking about? Well, one is called 4D printing. And I hear that and you're thinking, okay, what the fuck does that mean? Like you're printing time? Bitch. You can't, I know a lot of things about time. You can't fucking print time.
Yeah, pretty sure.
I'm making my guffaw face. But also what he means is that materials, like clothes and metals, that change over time based on temperature and other variables. So, and once you say it like that, oh, I get that. So we can make something like creating graphene, creating new synthetic materials that might harden or soften based on the temperature, based on the humidity, based on, you can see the applications in the military or the game Prey. What was Crisis? Yeah, the hit game Crisis by the creators of Fall
2006.
2000. Hey, it's happening. 2006 is happening right now.
Yeah. This is the future to Klaus Schwab.
Yeah, I got some. I'm wearing armor that only hardens on impact. It's light until you punch it, and then it hardens and absorbs a different way. That stuff's being worked on now. But he's also talking about creating materials that can actually shift. Which, you'd say that to a boomer, they're saying, "Oh my god, I can have moving tie-dye shirts." Boomers are not equipped to deal with this. Boomers. I think boomers need to die before we can actually guide this, because you'd say this to a boomer, either they don't understand it or the applications they see are really dumb. They look at like new nanomaterials and they're thinking, how does this impact Margaritaville? How does this impact the Murder, She Wrote reruns? There's more or less or bigger. It's 3. I can be in Murder, She Wrote. They don't have the language. They don't have the scalpels to take this apart. And stuff like he talks about gene editing, which is it should be scarier. It sounds not as scary as it actually is, but he says, as research into genetic engineering progresses, he says, for example, the development of the CRISPR method in gene editing and therapy, the constraints of effective delivery and specificity will be overcome, leading us with one immediate and most challenging question, particularly from an ethical viewpoint. How will genetic editing revolutionize medical research and medical treatment? In principle, both plants and animals could potentially be engineered to produce pharmaceuticals and other forms of treatment. So, there's been photos floating around now of these just, I don't know, Lovecraftian nightmare flesh entities like pigs being genetically engineered with no feet or heads or brains. Just like a pink, fleshy, 4-legged thing that's hooked up to tubes. And then you look at that and you say, ah! You see that and you reach for a gun. Just instinctively, you have to. They're saying, no, this is good. This is going to cure cancer. And then the sound you make is, ah. You're bothered, but you're not cancer. Alarmed.
I prefer the cancer.
I choose check, please. Cancer. Thank you. Researchers have already started to engineer the genomes of pigs with the goal of growing organs suitable for human transplantation. This is what we're talking about. In line with the point made earlier about how different technologies fuse and enrich each other, 3D manufacturing will be combined with gene editing to produce living tissues for the purpose of tissue repair and generation. So what also could be printed in with that tissue is what you should be asking yourself. And if people are struggling you can take this sort of development and apply to whatever your ideology is. If you are a far right, a fascist, a national socialist, you can see how does this affect your ethnic identity. If you are a libertarian, I think how does this affect private property and the sovereignty I have over my body. If you are an anarchist, you can see this, and holy shit, like this will not lead you to more freedom. I think maybe anarchists are slow on the uptake on this one, because they're at war with everything else. But I think this threatens anarchists. This threatens a Marxist, I guess. I think you can frame this where it's relevant to everything. And in my opinion, the winning ideology that wins over the hearts and the minds of the people will be the ideology, the political ideology, that takes this into account and has a plan or an answer for it. And maybe the answer isn't just stop it, because maybe it can't be stopped. But you need to be able to guide it. You need to be on the front lines ideologically and politically saying, I'm aware this is happening. I believe this is relevant to the people I am talking about. And again, if you're an ethnicist, if you're black, if you're a black nationalist, if you can't see how this affects the black identity or the future of Africa, you don't have any business talking about the future. If this doesn't factor into your future plans, you should not be talking about the future. That's all I have to say. And I'm not pegging this on anyone, because I don't think anyone really does it right. I think there's only the couple of groups who have this technocratic stuff on their radar, and I don't think they do a terribly good job. Sometimes they're just like, yes, more. I like that. Give me more of it in my mouth right now. Like some of the only ones talking about this are accelerationists. I'm like, yeah, I hate this. More, please. Make a buffet of this. I want 12 plates of this because I hate this. Those are the only guys talking about this, I think. And what I want is people to have a more practical and relevant plan for what this sort of genetic monitoring would have on you, what the global surveillance and these power structures that are trying to defeat nationalism and are doing a pretty good job at it. kind of gotten to Bill Maher. They're doing a pretty good job at it. New rule: print my organs and put a QR code on them. New rule: 4D print my organs in Israel. Okay. Going into Valley Girl there. And also, he's got a few points or predictions for 2025, if we'd like to go into that. We'll see how many of these are true. And he's got a study here. They did a survey, and people rated which of these were more likely, these predictions for 2025. Which are most likely? I'll start at the top. And these are actually pretty reasonable. I think these will happen. 91% of respondents, 10% of people wearing clothes connected to the internet. Do you think we'll get there by 2025? I think so. 90% of people having unlimited and free online storage, advertising supported. I don't know how you would do that. Like 90% of people, I guess, if it's included with your phones, then I guess we could get there if everyone has a cell phone. 89% of people said 1 trillion sensors connected to the internet. I can see that because sensors and the advancement of sensors are big into this, and that's just a very basic, like, builders technologist thing. Like, yeah, the sensors themselves are adapting very well. Okay, 86% of people say the first robotic pharmacist in the U.S. Maybe. I can see surgeon too. 85%, 10% of reading glasses connected to the internet. And I'm seeing this right now too. I got to get new glasses the other day. Ray-Ban are coming out with some sunglasses that are connected directly to Instagram. The idea is that you're taking photos, you're doing Instagram stories from your glasses. They tried this previously with Google Glass, didn't go over too well, didn't take off. I was big into augmented reality back in the day. I thought this is kind of cool. Didn't take off. VR headsets are actually taking longer than I thought to go, but I can see 10% of all reading glasses just early adopter nerds just doing this. Why not? I can see that by 2025. 80% of people at the very bottom, only 45% of people thought this. The first AI machine on a corporate board of directors. I'd put that close to the top. I don't know about you. From seeing what I'm seeing here in 2022, it's 2022, right? What are we at?
Yeah,
it was 2016
that's
for a
us.
minute. I keep thinking it's like 2017.
We all wish it was 2017.
Everything used to be so fun.
It was great.
First AI machine on a corporate board of directors. Yeah, probably. Why not? One thing that, and we'll wrap this up soon because we got to get going, but some things that even he points out, and this is a disruptive problem he's got no answer for, is that the fourth industrial revolution by design substitutes capital for labor. Now, what does that mean? So traditionally, we said this on a previous episode, where when you look at what universal basic income actually means, and there's a lot of different arguments for universal basic income. One that I see is that if it does become accepted and popular and implemented, the universal basic income means that, in my opinion, the countries don't view their people like assets anymore. They're more of an impediment to something. We just want you to go away. Here's some money. Stop talking. Labor isn't really a bargaining chip anymore. Labor isn't something that they need to marshal and kind of negotiate with the people with. They figured out the labor problem, right? So it's like, okay, here's some money. Shut up. You're paying people to shut up. That's what universal basic income is. So once you realize that, if you get that, that means that your government has just decided that you're not even really worth talking to anymore. You're not something they need to be scared of, certainly, but you're also something they actually don't find any use for, or they figured out a way to find their power source from some other way. And he recognized this. He says capital is the driver of the revolution. It's not people actually making things or producing things. It's people accumulating all that power. And again, here's a problem that he says, but has got no solution for. And he backs this up by, he said, in the next decade, 47% of employment is at risk, especially middle-class jobs, whereas traditionally it was blue-collar jobs. And for some reason, people didn't care about those. People didn't care about like the lower level jobs. But if you're a middle class worker, an office worker, you can sure as shit believe that this is happening to you. 47% of employment, period, is at risk. And I don't know about you. I don't see a lot of politicians talking about this. I don't see a lot of people interested in this. And this is going to affect you. This isn't even migration stuff. This is you won't have a fucking job and you'll be starving, which is kind of happening right now. Hope you like this. And he calls something the productivity paradox. He notes this midway through the book. He says, increased technological capabilities does not actually inspire increased productivity. And there's no explanation for it. So it's a paradox. I don't know what to do about this. So yeah, we are advancing, but people aren't making things. Not only are people not really making things because they can't manufacture things, but there doesn't seem to be a productive drive in people. And that's something I'm interested in as well. And we've noticed this, if you've been living over the past 7 years, that there is a lack of spirit in people. All the businesses we're making, there's nothing. The only one I can think of is Elon Musk. I know a lot of people have their opinions about Elon Musk, but I'm like, this guy's just trying to get to fucking Mars. We used to have a lot more of these guys. These guys who used to inspire, the inspirational guys we have now are the ones running WeWork, the ones saying, like, we're just trying to make everybody equal and happy. There is no Faustian man. There's no guy like, look, I'm building a big fucking thing that's going to change the world, and I'm going to go into space, and you're going to go into space too. That's the only exciting thing. What other tech have you been excited about? Really ask yourself. In mid-20th century, they can come out with shit that got you excited. What the fuck am I excited in the SaaS service economy? Nothing. Even the problems they're telling me they're trying to solve, I don't even recognize as problems. No one wants to really invent anything. No one's got fire in them to do anything. And I think he's like, yeah, we have all the tech, but no one wants to do anything. We'll keep an eye on that. I'm like, no, that means you're dead. This is death.
Yeah,
this is what death feels like.
Not going to make it. This
is the me-centered society. And we mentioned this in a previous episode, but Klaus Schwab has a solution. The solution he has in this book, when they raise the question, okay, let's say there's universal basic income. Let's say, everything you get comes to pass. What are people going to do? Are we just going to die? And he says in the book, I'm paraphrasing here, but he says, because human desire is limitless, then the services we can create to cater to that desire are also limitless. Basically, he's proposing a completely hedonistic world. He says, we're going to invent things to want, and then people will have jobs fulfilling that. So new hedonisms, new addictions, new desires and passions, extraterrestrial things, but that's going to be the economy he envisions. Like, we'll just figure that out later. We'll find something for you to get hooked on. That's kind of social media. We're going to introduce you to a desire for stimulus that you did not previously have, and then you'll be employed servicing that. Doesn't that sound good? That's his solution to the problem stated in this book. And he proposes a model where global leadership networks work more with other leadership than with the people, like we were just talking about. They view the people, capital T, capital P, the people, as an impediment. This whole global, and I start talking like this, people think, oh my God, he's an anti-globalist guy. But it's true. These are organizations that are only going to network with themselves. They have no longer a connection with the citizenry. And they're trying to make you a global citizen. Then they'll say, we actually don't have a connection with you. We have a connection with other leadership groups. And this is something you see even now. There's a book we covered earlier on called Revolt of the Elites by Christopher Lasch. That's pretty good. That speaks of the phenomena of these high, and when we say elites, we can be anyone who makes a lot of money and doesn't interface with the people of their workplace even. The more executive leadership you have that are separate from the inner workings of the company, they just see themselves as a higher class. They have a disconnect with the rest of society, and they're in the stratosphere now. That's kind of what the revolt of the elites is. It's like, if you don't, this is how factories used to be run. You would have the leadership, but they were on the factory floor. There was a relationship leadership would have with the people. You remove that leadership, then the people are just some problem on a spreadsheet you have to solve for. You don't see them as people. You see them as numbers, and I just need these numbers to go away. And you stop caring what you do to make them go away. So he calls it the globalist model is presented in the multi-elites and others. The global disruption network, populated only by elites, presents totally new problems. He calls it contextual intelligence. And this will be the last thing we talk about on page 107 here. Good leaders understand and master contextual intelligence. A sense of context is defined as the ability and willingness to anticipate emerging trends and connect the dots. These have been common characteristics of effective leadership across generations, and in the fourth industrial revolution, they are a prerequisite and adaptation for survival. So, in short, what he's talking about is, for this model to work, you need to network on a global scale with other leadership groups and other powerful groups. That's it. And those are the only people you need to deal with.
Let's also be clear. The future is not just happening. The future is built by us, by a powerful community as you here in this room. We have the means to improve the states of the world.
So as throughout this book, you see a removal of regular people from the conversation and also viewing them as an impediment. And more than anything, inventing solutions to get them to shut up. That's all this is. So that's that's the book writ large. I got to get going now, but I wanted to do this because we had a friend of the show named 45K Mom and Populist, who we have on our group and who I like on Telegram, very economics minded. But they had said, dude, have you actually read Klaus Schwab? We always talk about Klaus Schwab. We always talk about the World Economic Forum. He called me on it. I never sat down and read it. I've seen bits and blurbs and pieces, and I've seen the website, but I never sat down and read the thesis of what these people want. And so I've read the thesis, and I've delivered the goods. And this connects directly to our last episode. And so any thoughts on that before we head out?
Well, I guess it's not surprising. It's just some kind of bullshit. And we talked about how we'd be covering this, and I kind of was hoping there'd be something more to it than some perverted German boomer who wants to drink my children's adrenochrome. But that sounds like it's pretty much what it is. I'm exaggerating, but I mean, it's honestly, it's what I expected. From and having not read the book and having heard so much of what he's said and what his goals are and what his organization's goals are, this is exactly what I expected would be in his book. So
yeah, and the addition of COVID to it was, this must happen now. It must happen faster because COVID has revealed the structural problems and what we got. But that's why my solution must go faster. And that's why if you listen to him talk, it's him, but also other global leaders, other heads of pharmaceutical companies saying, well, of course we need pharmaceutical companies running the show. We need them running the cops. That sounds good and real. And I like that. Yeah. I want more of that. Right. Have you ever thought what a pharmaceutical company needs? It needs to run the UN and run your neighborhood cops. I like that. Can I have that, but faster?
Do not let the rapists win. Listen and love Blood Satellite.